Alberta, baby. What a great province this is. What a great country this is. In fact, I should just be told, I've never said this to anyone, including my wife, but I know that in Canada it's official policy that coming out of the closet is good. Unless you're the Prime Minister.
Did he just call Justin Trudeau? I mean, he's always been a little sweet.
The nude scene wasn't really supposed to be a nude scene until someone showed me a picture of, soldiers bathing in World War I, one of his ancestors, and it was just, white bums as far as the eye could see the whole way down the beach. I said, well, you know what? If that was what they did, then that's what I'll do.
I hope they don't freeze my bank account for this. I should just withdraw all my money before I publish this video. Hello everyone, if you're a new viewer, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If this is your second, third, fourth time watching one of my videos and you are not yet subscribed, we already go together. Okay, make it official and hit that subscribe button. For the last couple of months, my Canadian subscribers have been asking me to do a video discussing the issues facing Canada because many of us share the same frustrations. And Tucker Carlson recently did a speaking engagement in Alberta, and in his opening speech, he spoke very candidly on many of the issues that we are facing here in Canada. And he was very accurate, actually surprisingly accurate in everything that he said. So I decided to do a reaction to his speech and expand on some of the points that he touched on. The original video has gotten over 1 million views in just the first 48 hours. And the reason it has resonated with so many viewers is not just because he is a well-known and popular media personality, but it has a lot to do with the fact that many Canadians share the same thoughts and frustrations, but are bullied into silence. And to see someone who doesn't even live here call out the bullshit was very refreshing. But apparently, Tucker Carlson actually does have some Canadian heritage.
And I wonder, why am I so obsessed with Canada? And I thought, because I'm part Canadian. My great-grandfather, actually my father's family was in the colonies, and then they brought democracy, and they're like, we're out. We're going to Nova Scotia. And so they spent a couple hundred years there. The refuses, they're still there, by the way. I think they're all liberals.
I actually Googled to see if he could run for Prime Minister in Canada, since he does have Canadian blood. And good news, you don't even have to be born in Canada to be Prime Minister. You just need to have a Canadian citizenship. Anyone can get a Canadian citizenship, so anyone can run for Canadian office. And you don't have to have any prior work experience. You don't have to have any prior qualifications. As a matter of fact, the minimum age to be eligible to run for Prime Minister in Canada is only 18 years old. Who wouldn't want an 18-year-old controlling their country?
Bring me his head.
Anyways, let's get into Tucker Carlson's speech.
So I've come to Canada a lot, and every time I come, so many things strike me. First and foremost, the natural beauty, the unbelievable natural beauty, prettier than Switzerland, in my opinion. And the second thing I notice is the politeness of the people. That's real. And the third thing I notice is that all the comedians left decades ago. And it brings it out in me. And making fun of Canadians, and as I've already told you, and I hope it's obvious, is done with love. But I just can't control myself, because no one will ever laugh at your joke. And so every time I go to Toronto, which I try not to do, but I do wind up there, every time I check in a hotel, I'm like, you guys have hot water? Like, where'd you get all the electricity? This is unbelievable. And they always have the same responses. We've had electricity for a long time, eh?
False. That's not the Toronto accent. People in Toronto speak either the way that I'm speaking right now, or they speak like this.
Come on, dog, he's a hockey player. The man won the Art Ross Trophy 4 years in a row, fam.
Yo, there's Barry Mans and Nathan Phillips right now, still.
Oh, the Toronto accent is so special, but I digress.
But one of the reasons I do it is because I do think it's important to laugh at your circumstances, not simply because it makes you feel better, though it does, but because it gives you perspective on them. And humor requires some distance, some critical distance, both from yourself and from your surroundings. And you can't really see things clearly until you have that. And so if you have a country where the funny people feel like they have to leave, that's a huge problem. And that's the first problem. The second problem is you can't really be effective as a political movement or a resistance movement, which effectively you are, if you don't laugh at your enemies. Because not only are they evil, and they are, they're also ludicrous. And it's really important to say that because it saps their power immediately. And so to look at your enemies, like let's say you had some sort of weird prime minister like to dress up in fussy costumes. It would be super important to point that out a lot.
You know, it's never really dawned on me, but I've never seen a Canadian TV program make fun of Justin Trudeau. We don't really have political satire in the mainstream media the way it exists in America. People who don't like him make fun of him on social media. Independent Canadian media outlets may make fun of him in their online publications, but it doesn't really exist in the mainstream media here in Canada. We don't have here what you guys have in America. America has shows like Stephen Colbert, Bill Maher, even news outlets like Fox News and CNN will often engage in political satire. Saturday Night Live engages in political satire and will make fun of the president, vice president, and other people in government. In Canada, we don't have that. One of the biggest media companies here in Canada is CBC. And they are funded by the government.
Is there anyone in the country who supports this guy? He's so, I mean, I know him only, I've never met him. I only know him through television. I know his cousin, Gavin Newsom, pretty well, but I don't know him. Is there anyone who takes him seriously? And everyone in the room said, oh, yeah. Young people, particularly young women, take him very seriously. They love him. And I thought, there's really only one way to combat that, and that's by pointing out what an absurd poser this guy is. He's like a ridiculous figure. Like, you should dislike and resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. The guy's like, he's showing up for a costume party when no one else is. There's no costume party, and there's Justin Trudeau. Like, speaking as some sort of moral voice. Weird little cross-dresser. So anyway, that's my first piece of advice.
Tucker Carlson has no chill. I'll be surprised if they let his ass back into Canada.
And that's the main thing that I want to say in the short time allotted today, is that you should recognize what is happening to you. This is not a political debate to which you've been invited to participate. This is a destruction of you and your culture and your beliefs and your children and your future as a country. That's not overstatement. It's provable statistically. So just take 3 steps back. If you have a government that is giving fentanyl to your children, as they are in BC. I notice your premier has a no fentanyl to kids policy, God bless her. But then take 2 steps further back from that and ask yourself, if someone's giving fentanyl to your children, what's kind of the message of that? Well, they're trying to kill your children, obviously. Fentanyl? It's the #1 cause of death under 40 in the United States. #1 in the whole country, followed by suicide. If you want to know where we are, we're about 2 years behind you.
The opioid crisis here in Canada is very bad, especially in the major cities such as Vancouver and Toronto. And in an effort to win the war on drugs, the Canadian government decided to invest more money into treatment programs and facilities to help those struggling with addiction. I'm just kidding. That would make sense. So obviously, that's not what they did. Obviously, the cure to drug addiction is free drugs.
While the Prime Minister has sent inflation for gas, heat, and groceries soaring, there is one product that's actually come down in price: powerful opioids. The Prime Minister has spent $100 million on so-called safe supply. One Global News reporter went into the street to find out where all these drugs are going. Turns out they're being resold to other addicts in order to raise the money to buy deadly fentanyl. Will the Prime Minister cancel the dollars for drugs and instead put the resources into treatment for addicts?
So I live in a town that has a safe injection site. I have been living here for almost 10 years, and in the last 10 years, nothing has improved. There's just as many addicts on the street now, if not more. On a few occasions, I've even seen minors shooting up, and here in Canada, parents, they have no rights. If they want to put their child into a treatment facility, they can't.
Here in BC, to get kids off the streets and into drug treatment, the kids need to consent, no matter what their age. In fact, across Canada, a physician's legal advisory group says the legal age of majority has become largely irrelevant when it comes to young people consenting to medical treatment. If the kids are deemed mature enough by their doctors, they can decide to consent to or refuse treatment.
There are so many parents who have lost their children to drug addiction, and legally they were not allowed to intervene. The Canadian dream.
Second, if they are trying to kill you, And by the way, I know I'm offending everyone, even this group, because no one in Canada wants to talk about anything. It's like an Episcopalian Christmas dinner. But Anglo-Canada, like Anglo everywhere, doesn't like to say anything out loud. But let me just do it anyway. If you're killing 50,000 of your citizens, if the government is doing that through the MAID program, and a lot of them are not actually terminally ill, they're just sad, and the government is encouraging them to submit to being by the government, and then won't release the recent statistics, like, what is that? And I bet there's zero conversation about that in this country, because I know this country and I know what it's like. It's too horrible. No one wants to talk about it. You should talk about it.
The MAID program is something that doesn't get spoken about enough here in Canada. MAID is an acronym for Medical Assistance in Dying. This became lawful here in Canada in 2016, and since its inception, the eligibility criteria keeps getting more and more lenient. There are currently people on the waiting list, not because they have terminal illness, but because they have mental health problems, drug addiction, or lack adequate housing, like this man.
Amir Farsood of St. Catharines, Ontario, has been physically disabled for more than a decade. Government support barely covers his expenses in an apartment that is already a bargain. That was put into jeopardy last summer when his landlord decided to sell.
As I kept looking at places to try and find another place to move to, there just aren't any.
The waiting list for assisted housing was 8 years long, and everything else was just too expensive. That's when he decided to turn to MAID.
Originally, when I had thought of MAID, it was something that I was going to access, 10, 15 years down the road, when my various ailments got past the point that they could be managed well enough to continue. But it got to the point where it was just, well, I'm basically faced with a choice of, do I want to die frozen on a subway grate in Toronto in a couple of months, or at least in my bed with a modicum of sort of comfort and dignity, if you will.
There are people on the waiting list with treatable health conditions. There was one woman who was on the list to end her life. She ended up going to America, getting the surgery that she needed, and now she's fine. There's also this 23-year-old man who was on the waiting list to take his life, and luckily his family found out and they intervened and saved his life.
Tomorrow I was planning to wake up quite early, before the sun rose, spend time with my dogs to be the last day with them, the last morning. So my appointment was 9 a.m.
We first met Keanu on the eve of that date. A lifelong diabetic, he'd recently lost sight in one eye. Depressed and in pain from surgery that failed to save his sight, he told us he'd found a doctor who'd agreed to end his life. Then his family found an email. With their son's date for MAID just weeks away, Margaret Marcilla launched into action. Her reach out quickly became a social media campaign. She named the doctor, and within days, more than 10,000 people had signed a petition calling on Ontario's health minister to intervene. It never came to that. Having approved and set a date for Keanu's death twice, the doctor decided to cancel, leaving the family relieved, but like many who heard the story, stunned that a 23-year-old with complications of diabetes had come that close to being helped to die.
According to Stats Canada, between 2016 and 2022, around 45,000 people have ended their life through the MAID program, and that is almost certainly an undercount because the Canadian government has been fudging the numbers. They have been recording these deaths by the illness that the person had, assuming they had one, versus assisted suicide. For instance, the young man that was on the waiting list for the MAID program, his underlying condition was diabetes. So had he actually gone through with it, they would have recorded his death as a death from diabetes rather than assisted death through the MAID program. So it's impossible to know what the true numbers are.
It doesn't matter who's in the Prime Minister's office. Your rights remain the same because you were born with them, because you are not a slave, you're a human being, and you have inherent dignity because God made you. And if they're taking those rights away piecemeal and doing so in the name of public safety, even as they make the public sphere much more dangerous, which they have, in case you haven't noticed. Canada has a lot more violent crime now than it did 20 years ago. Have you noticed? Of course you have, you live here. So if they're limiting your freedom to say what you think, which is a freedom of conscience, the most basic of all freedom, your freedom to defend yourself and your family against bodily harm, which has got to be a twin to the first one, if they're taking away your voting power by changing the population of your country, which they are doing, and no one wants to talk about that, Canada has the highest immigration rate in the world per capita. If you change the population of the country, you change the country.
One of the biggest differences between Canada and America is the way we view ourselves as a country. America is a melting pot where everyone assimilates to the already established American culture, whereas Canada prides itself on being a cultural mosaic, a society without a shared national identity where different cultures coexist side by side. And that's what has always made Canada such a popular destination for immigrants. But since Trudeau has come into office, his aggressive immigration policies have had a negative impact on Canada. Since Trudeau took office in 2015, immigration has already increased from 300,000 new residents per year to 400,000 new residents per year. And now, Canada plans to welcome 500,000 new residents per year. And many of us are pissed about it. Canadians are struggling to afford basic necessities, and housing continues to be a huge problem. The ability to buy a home in a major city is out of reach for most home buyers, and the cost of rent is not much better. Canada needs to build homes fast to meet the housing demand, so the government has increased immigration. The purpose of increasing immigration is to bring in skilled labor to build these new homes. However, these are not robots, these are people. New immigrants also need a place to live, so the strategy is contributing to the problem that it's trying to fix. Additionally, there's a growing frustration surrounding the large number of international students coming from India. Many locals are upset because the large number of foreign students is impacting the housing markets and the job markets, in addition to the cultural clashes between Indian students and Canadians.
A video is going viral showing complete chaos unfold at a Diwali celebration in Mississauga. It took place at Westwood Square Mall in Mississauga, and Peel Regional Police say they're currently investigating the situation.
And the international students are upset too because they expected life in Canada to be better, and they expected the Canadian government to offer them more support.
The Canadian dream has come crashing down. The number of students from India applying to study in Canada has dropped dramatically in the second half of this year. You may think the recent diplomatic row between India and Canada is to blame, but there's more to the story. If you open social media, you will be inundated with videos of students sharing their grievances. They are criticizing the stifling cost of living. They are calling out the lack of opportunities promised. They say they are not happy with the career prospects being offered, especially after doling out nearly 19 lakh rupees a year on Canadian education.
There are many Canadians who are skeptical of the motives behind the government bringing in so many immigrants, and most won't say it out loud, but in private, they will tell you that they believe the Liberal government is importing voters. And I'm really not sure if the strategy will work because it seems as though everyone hates the Trudeau government, even immigrants, and me.
The last thing I'll say, which also may be controversial because it sounds like a parochial concern or some sort of, weird religious thing or something, and it's not. But take a look at what they're doing to your Christians. And I say this for a couple of, I am a Christian, but that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this because there's kind of no more inoffensive and peaceful group in the world than the Christians. In fact, there isn't. Their religion tells them, commands them to turn the other cheek and to put the concerns of others above their own concerns. So if you have a problem with those precepts, explain it to me. Speak slowly so I can understand. I think every person in this room, regardless of your faith, can agree, yeah, I'm for that. I wish I was more like that. That's good. We need more of those people in society. Serve others for the sake of service. So if you're hassling that group, maybe you've got another agenda that we should be concerned about, even if we're not in that group. If we burn 90 of their churches to the ground, and the Prime Minister and his little weird buddies are endorsing that, burning churches, if you're on the side of burning churches, let me just say, I don't need any other facts of the case, you're on the wrong side.
96 churches, actually, have been burned or vandalized in the last couple of years by radical leftists. His speech was much longer, but I didn't want my video to be too long, so I didn't include his entire speech, but I will link the entire speech in the description box down below. I encourage you to watch it, especially Canadians. I think that Canadians need to hear his message. If you liked this video, please don't forget to hit the like button. If you're not yet subscribed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I will also have my social media links in the description box down below. If you liked this video and you would like to see more like it, I will have 2 more videos for you in the end cards. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.